The stock market just had its largest drop since 2020, around $2 trillion lost overall, according to data from FactSet. So brace yourself for what is about to happen. We may begin to see drastic change in our economy. The last time tariffs were used in such a drastic fashion was the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930. This means we will see prices increase, a change of consumer spending, and if it gets bad enough, even a recession. According to JP Chase, the current chance of recession happening is a looming 40%. Whether you agree with these tariffs or not, they're going to impact you directly. Food prices, car pricing, auto financing, your stock portfolio, and yes, even your real estate investments. According to the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank, economic uncertainty is continuing to rise, nearly matching July 5th, 2024, where the beginning of the Israel-Hamas conflict happened. And it's approaching a similar trajectory as the 2020 COVID shutdown. Today I want to break down a few points. 1, what exactly are tariffs? Number 2, the historical importance of them. Number 3, how tariffs will affect your daily life. Number 4, how they're impacting the Arizona housing market. And 5, lastly, what you should expect for the months ahead. Before I get into everything, if you could subscribe and hit the like button, that would be fantastic. It helps the channel out a ton. Come on, real quick, just press the button. All right, appreciate you guys, thank you. So, what is a tariff? It is a tax or duty imposed by a government on goods from other countries. Essentially, it's an additional fee on all products outside of the United States. Now, the important part is who pays the tariff. It's not the foreign exporter. It's the US company importing the goods. So if Coca-Cola brings aluminum in from Canada, Coca-Cola, pays that extra cost. Then they have 2 choices. 1, take a hit on profit and lose money, or 2, pass that additional cost on to consumers like you and I. And back in the Federal Reserve Bank, corporate profits are at the highest level since the country's been founded. And according to the National Bureau of Economic Research, who studied the impact of the 2018 trade war, they stated, we find that the US tariffs were almost completely passed through into US domestic prices, so that the entire incidence of the tariffs fell on domestic consumers and importers up to now, with no impact so far on the prices received by a foreign exporter. We also find that the US producers responded to reduced import competition by raising their prices. So for regular folk like you and I, here's what that means. The increased costs were almost entirely passed on to Americans, increasing prices across the board. And China and Mexico did not lower their prices to offset the tariff. And US companies that face less competition from the tariff raised their prices, further increasing costs to Americans. So even if they weren't affected, it still increased their prices. For those at different income levels, these tariffs will affect you differently. For lower income individuals and households, there is a disproportionate burden. Typically, a larger percent of income is spent on goods like food, clothing, and transportation. Price increases will be more obvious here, creating a significant and immediate impact on their budgets. There is also more vulnerability to the job market change in an economic slowdown were to happen. For middle-income households, these effects will also be felt, but not as severe as lower income. Food and goods will still be more money, but so will vehicles, electronics, and other purchases that are typically in that discretionary spending habit. And with a large percent of Gen Z fitting into either one of these categories, it can be alarming for the next generation. A recent article showcases that Gen Z has more debt than any other generation. And that isn't even slowing them down. Gen Z is spending more on travel than previous generations, with 65% expected to travel more in 2025 than they did the prior year. Debt is not slowing them down. And lastly, for high-income households, there may be some effects on things like luxury items and vehicles, but a majority of the risk is coming from investments to industries largely affected. Overall, not as touched. So what exactly is the purpose of a tariff and why would we do it? Historically, tariffs have been a major part of the US economy, but these were far before the US had additional forms of taxation like income tax, which has reduced the reliance on tariffs for revenue. And today, modern economies are highly interconnected and often bring in retaliation tariffs more than they did in the late 1700s. Before the 2024 election, the word tariff might not even been in your vocabulary. Now, today, it's one of the most popular words in America according to Google Trends. But believe it or not, tariffs have been a major part of the US economy since the colonial era. From 1798 to 1913, tariffs accounted for a staggering 50 to 90% of the federal income tax. Alexander Hamilton was one of the strongest proponents, saying that these played a major role in protecting the American manufacturing sector from foreign competition and promoting industrial growth over time. Even Abraham Lincoln, who in 1847 declared, "Give us a protective tariff and we shall have the greatest nation on earth." He then implemented a 44% tariff during and after the Civil War. And he had the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930. This is arguably one of the most impactful uses of tariffs in the 20th century, with, unfortunately, mostly negative consequences. Signed into law at the onset of the Great Depression, it sought to protect American farmers by raising import duties by an average of 20%. However, this was met with retaliation from European countries, leading to a decline in US and European trade by more than 2/3. Some speculate that these tariffs exacerbated the economic turmoil in the 1930s and may have contributed to the European bank failures, which later led to one of the most infamous European leaders in modern history. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, just look at Kanye West's Twitter account. It's a scary place right now. After World War II, the World Trade Organization was created, with a couple predecessors, and substantially decreased tariff barriers to world trade in order to protect free trade. While tariffs have been used in recent years, like Bush did in 2002 or Biden did in 2024, on specific items like steel and electric vehicle lithium-ion batteries, this is the largest fundamental change and a broad shift in the systematic use of tariffs since the World War II liberalization movement. Based on how things went in the 1930s, we may be in for a bit of a ride. So, how will tariffs affect your day-to-day life? So now that you know we haven't seen tariffs like this since the 1930s, a lot of what I'm about to say is speculative. But here are the changes you may start to see. The first is a limited set of product options depending on who is still importing and exporting. Some items on the shelf may no longer exist. Number two is going to be a higher cost of goods across the board, with countries like Canada, Mexico, and China making up 45% of US imports. This exceeded over $3 trillion in 2022, so tariffs will be felt in a large way. China is a key trade partner for electronics, mineral fuels, ores, machinery, including computers. And Mexico is a major trade partner for vehicles, with manufacturers like GM, Nissan, Volkswagen, Mazda, Toyota, Audi, Honda. There's also a huge resource for computers, monitors, phones, medical instruments, beer, and crude oil. There's other small items too, like avocados, tomatoes, peppers, washing machines, and clothing. And for Canada, we import machinery transport equipment, mineral fuels, manufactured goods, food and live animals. Everyday items like dairy products from cheese and butter to syrup, toilet paper, paper towels, cereals, snacks, and even some cleaning products. So yes, maybe it's time to stock up again on toilet paper or just get a bidet. Though if the US can implement a substitute partner for some of these key items, it could simmer down the effects. But this will depend on how Trump implements the tariffs on those other countries. For example, a common one is swapping Vietnam and China. But in that exact case, there was a massive 46% tariff implemented on Vietnam, so that might not be a great option for us. One other factor is corporate profits. In the last 5 years, we have felt inflation and higher grocery prices more than we had the decade before. Most of this, especially in the early phases, was because of inflation. But as time went on, corporate profits have disproportionately contributed to inflation. Meaning, the reason your groceries have been higher is not because of inflation. It's because companies realized they could charge you more and you would still buy it. So in this case of tariffs, even if only 30% of products see an increase, other companies who are not affected may also increase their prices to match, a term being coined as greedflation. And this was briefly touched on the study in 2018 from earlier in this video. Now for the housing market. Outside of the recession and a brief period in the 90s, housing has been one of the best hedges for inflation and your wallet. Home prices have steadily increased over the last several decades and continue to rise. So if we were to enter a recession, typically mortgage rates also drop. As investors begin to place their money in safe bets like a 10-year treasury, it drives down the rate and typically reflects back onto mortgages. So in a downturn like we saw in COVID era, it brings more and more buyers to the market. This increases competition, again lowering supply and increasing the prices. And if that wasn't enough, there are more low-rate mortgages today than ever before in history. There is also an incredible amount of homes completely paid off, with that taking up 40% of the market. So if things get crazy, these homeowners know that there is no better option than to stick with what they already have. With low payments or no payment at all, there is not a lot of motivation to move. In order to see housing prices drop significantly, we will need to see over 50% fall in demand and a similar percent in inventory increase. In the last 40 years, demand has rarely fallen below the millions. But here's where we may see some inventory come from. The first is going to be Airbnb owners and newer investors from that COVID era. When the market is good, everyone wins. And in 2020 to 2022, it was nearly impossible to lose on an investment, especially in Arizona. Low rates paired with record high appreciation made for a dangerous duo for new investors. It set a crazy, unrealistic expectation for the future. A lot of these investors purchased Airbnbs, traditional rentals, or even regular property to live in at the peak of the market. Now that the regulations are kicking in on Airbnb and other economic changes are adjusting spending habits across the country, those that could not do math from the start are facing a very scary reality. If they were barely making money in the good days, like a classic Burr investor, each month they lose money now is even more impactful. So these investors who can no longer afford to skip reading a P&L will be forced to sell or turn the keys over to the bank. Personally, in my traditional real estate business, which, oh hey, by the way, If you made it this far in the video, you must realize that I somewhat know what I'm talking about, and I would love to help you buy or sell a home in Arizona. But I have seen a lot of change. I have seen more pre-foreclosures than ever before, more regular foreclosures, and even short sales are back. Which, if you said any of this in 2020, you would have been burned at the stake. But even then, these investors make up a small minority of the market and would not be enough to drastically change prices for the better for the buyer. And in even more smaller, more localized inventory, areas like California and Florida could begin to sell as their pricing has drastically changed from insurance and property taxes. They may not be able to afford it anymore. Since 1950 today, home prices have only dropped 7 times. Most of these drops were during the recession, where ninja loans were popular. No income, no job, and no assets. And to make matters even more interesting, the wealthiest 1% in America could buy 99% of American homes today. So if it even drops, does it really matter? At the end of the day, we're just all on a spinning rock in space. Interestingly enough, during a recession, rental prices tend to increase as well. With less qualified buyers shopping for homes, rents typically increase or at least stay the same. So, what's in store for the future? Ben Graham, one of the greatest investors of our time, who also helped mold Warren Buffett to who he is today, talked about volatile markets back in the 1950s. He says, price fluctuations have only one significant meaning for the true investor. They produce him with an opportunity to buy wisely when prices fall sharply, and to sell wisely when they advance a great deal. Furthermore, he stated, while enthusiasm may be necessary for great accomplishments elsewhere, on Wall Street it is almost invariably leads to disaster. If you are investing, now is as good of a time as any. You may buy a home today or a stock, and it could drop another 10% tomorrow. But tomorrow doesn't matter. If you measure in decades, you'd be wishing you would have bought more. So now is as good of a time as ever. As long as you don't need that money to survive in the next 10 to 20 years, it's the best investment you could possibly make. Just look at these titans of the industry. Wouldn't you wish you could buy more during the recession? If you really want to be rich, it's a game of consistency. Make a decent living, earn more than you spend, avoid bad debt, and invest before discretionary spending, month after month after month after month after month. The path to life you want is simple, not easy. Thanks for watching, and we'll see how this all unfolds. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.